Today on Making New Possible, I am honored to welcome a dear friend, Brandi Cummings, recently appointed as the Cultural Services Director for the City of Louisville, Colorado, who just began her tenure this summer in 2025. In this expanded role, she oversees the Louisville Public Library, the Historic Museum, and the city's arts and events programming, including major events like the 4th of July and the Labor Day festivities. Brandi is really unique, and you're going to hear that during our conversation, in the way that she deeply, deeply believes in making things better and building longer tables. Her leadership is rooted in community, transparency, and inclusive engagement, and she brings nearly 2 decades of experience building social infrastructure in municipal and library settings. She's grounded in strategic systems that emphasize belonging, civic trust, and human-centered initiatives. I'm really excited to explore all of these topics, including her own thoughts on leadership. So without further ado, welcome, Brandi.
Hi, Ange. Thanks for having me.
It's so good to see you.
I know. I'm so excited to see a friendly face.
Well, today we are talking about making new possible. And I'm actually going to admit to you that I riffed a little bit on the way I want to approach the topic of creative rebellion from your LinkedIn bio. And so I want to really start there. You are someone who describes yourself as making things better and building longer tables.
Yeah.
What does that phrase mean to you, and how has it guided your work?
Yeah. So making things better and building longer tables is kind of like my personal ethos. I love to share the story of my kindergarten report card that still lives in my parents' house in one of those boxes that's full of all the odds and ends you collect. And my teacher had written that Brandi couldn't complete her art project because she was too concerned about everyone else having the crayons they needed.
Cut, Brandi.
Right. If you know me, you're like, yeah, that's our girl, right? And I've thought about that so much in my life, just like this idea that teeny tiny 5-year-old Brandi was just really concerned with making sure that it was good for everyone and that everyone had what they needed, and that I couldn't even do my own thing until I felt comfortable that everyone could move forward. And I'm sure that teacher was like, hey, parents, watch out for this. This is going to get in the way. But I think about it as just it being my core identity, that I think that we can make systems, places, communities good for everyone with a little bit of intentionality and a little bit of hard work. We can make sure everyone has what they need, and then we can all move forward. And so when we're thinking about, making things better and building longer tables, it's about how do we make space for everyone, and how do we make sure that we're thinking about everyone? Yeah. And
I really
love
love that,
reflecting.
especially knowing your, career-long experience working in public institutions. It's not always the case, even for public places, that everyone feels welcome or that everyone
Absolutely.
feels like it's a space actually for them.
Yeah.
I think even in that framing, because this podcast explores creative rebellion, where we bucking systems,
Yeah.
or maybe even systems that need to be completely upended altogether. I think people think of things like libraries and museums, which you lead, as really traditional and slow to change. But my relationship with you has helped me to understand that that's not been your MO, or how you've approached working as a public servant throughout your career. And so can you sort of dive into ways in which you've reimagined or challenged what people think of public institutions?
Yeah. And I think you really hit it on the head, right? When we talk about public institutions, part of what makes them institutions is that they're sort of, long-standing, unchanging bedrocks, right? And there's a real beauty in that. There's such a beauty in the fact that public libraries have existed long before us, and God willing, long after us.
Right.
And they are the reflection of culture and community and all of these things. And they are slow changing. If you work in public libraries or museums, we all joke about how we adopt technology 10 to 15 to 20 years after it's up and running. About 7 years ago, we adopted self-checkout in my previous library in Kenosha. I mean, self-checkout's been around forever, right? Like
Hmm.
7 years ago wasn't that long. But the way some of this change is really happening is less about the institution's core purpose, right?
Sure.
Libraries will always be book places. Museums will always be places of curation, but it's more about how do we dismantle the systems inside of these institutions to be more inclusive and more equitable. What really excites me is like this new generation of public servants that are rising up and really challenging, like, what do these spaces mean to communities? What
Hmm.
does it mean to serve everyone? A tangible example is in my previous library, we had looked at our code of conduct. All libraries have them, a rule of like what behavior is acceptable. And one of the things that we had on ours was that we didn't allow sleeping in the library. But if it was like a Tuesday afternoon and one of our older patrons nodded off reading, a large print copy of James Patterson, we weren't waking them up. But chances are, if it was a person who was unhoused and had a lot of luggage with them, we were more likely to wake them up. And so
Sure.
it's about challenging those internal biases, right? Like, how do we recognize that as institutions that claim to champion equity, to champion accessibility, to provide possibility for people, how do we look internally and reflect? And so a lot of the challenging I've had the honor to do in these systems and in these institutions is by tearing apart some of the systems. What does it mean to be equitable? What does it mean to be diverse? How do we measure that? And by whose measurement of success are we looking at it? And how do we bring more of the community in? When I started working for public libraries, I was finishing up a paralegal degree. And my intention was actually to go back to Chicagoland, and I wanted to work in immigration law. Super challenging when you're not bilingual. And I started working at my public library part-time, super part-time, like 13 hours a week, and really fell in love with how it could redistribute power, right? Like
Okay.
everyone was on the same playing field at the library. It didn't matter if you were a doctor or a single mom or if you were unhoused or didn't matter what age you were, like everything was available to everyone in the same way. And so really looking at how we can use that privilege of space, that privilege of access to information to help empower people to define and discover the best versions of themselves, and then shifting our priorities away from like traditional success metrics. Are we just looking at how many copies of books are going out? Are we looking at how many people we're bringing in and lives we're touching and how they change?
Hmm.
So a lot of it's not tangible. A lot of it is in that qualitative storytelling, community building realm. But you see it when people walk in your door, and you see it when who's showing up at your events or in your spaces looks more like the entire community and not just those who already have privilege and power.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think what you're describing sounds really elegant, but I know it's hard fought. Like it
It is,
requires a steadfastness. And, I mean, that's why we're talking not just
yeah,
about creativity in general, but this idea of rebellion. Like you're going
yeah.
to have to be loud and at
Mhm.
least insistent, and consistently insistent in order for what you're saying as an aspiration to be what is really like a lived experience for anyone that crosses the threshold of a
Absolutely.
library or museum.
Yeah, absolutely. I joke with my team a lot that sometimes we have to push and sometimes we have to shove. And I think that I'm lucky enough to be the type of person who feels comfortable sometimes having to shove.
Hmm.
And now more than ever in the political climate we're in, being a steward of the public good comes at a price, and it has to come with a willingness to be targeted or to be examined or criticized or ridiculed in ways that we haven't had to deal with before. And so that rebellion is a steadfastness, right? It's a commitment. It's a commitment to like, this is what I know is right and true.
Hmm.
Um, that doing the most good for the most people, like being committed to the public good, is a noble virtue, and we're going to stand 10 toes down. It can be very lofty at times, but it can be really gritty,
For
gritty work.
sure. Well, you've sort of touched on this that you've worked in HR and marketing, communications, and now obviously cultural services. Was there a turning point in your career? You know what I mean? Was it just in those early days? with the like part-time gig that became a lifetime for you, you know what I mean, that you knew you wanted to be focused on building community systems?
Yeah, I think it is more of a, like, I imagine it like a gathering of pebbles more than just like a light bulb
Yeah,
moment.
specific threshold.
Yeah, where it's just like, as I started working in libraries and as I started seeing the way that they could empower people to meet needs, to explore, to open opportunities. But then as I gathered like parallel experiences doing other things, so the work I did with like young professional organizations and the work we did together, and in Milwaukee with like YP Week and those excursions, like, I can remember one trip we did to Phillips, Wisconsin, right, for that excursion, and just really having this moment of clarity at the end of a night that like building authentic space for people to connect, building space for people to bring the best and worst versions of themselves, just openly and honestly, so we could grow, was my cup filler. And I was like, wow, I can do this on a macro level with a public institution like the library, right? I can create a space for deliberative dialogue where people can come with clashing viewpoints and still find connection. I can create a space for art to be encompassed and culture to be experienced, and for people to really sort of wrestle with what it means to be human, but in a safe environment where there is no judgment, right? There is no preconceived notion or idea or barrier to that experience, because it's a public space. It's for everyone. And that sort of like gathering of these little micro experiences and seeing how they could build upon each other cemented so deeply in me that like community building, community systems, and like being a guardian of those systems was what was next for me. It was what I wanted to spend my time and talent on. I
I
couldn't
really
think of a
love that.
better calling.
I love the idea that us bowling in that dirty bowling alley, the
Like the
threshold
salad
moment
bar,
in Phillips.
that decommissioned salad bar.
No, I feel like, it was a threshold for you. And be like, yes, I can do this in other places.
Yeah, it really was. I was like, how can I create something for everyone else to feel this?
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm just teasing because I feel like a lot of
But
times
yeah.
when people think, particularly when you think about like the trajectory of your career and all of the positive impact you've had, like, oh, that it is like one key turning moment. I like this idea of collecting pebbles and that
Mhm.
it was a sensation even in the
Yeah.
obscure bowling alley. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? That
Yeah.
sort of like pointed you in the right direction, right? Like it was like,
Yeah.
go down this path. You know what I mean? Keep this sensation. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to look exactly like this exact.
No, I didn't have to bring everyone to Phillips,
Exactly.
but I wanted everyone to have the opportunity to like just have that reflection of self, like
Yep.
that joy, um, that just pure feeling of belonging,
Yeah.
and I think that's what's drawn me to so much of what I do, so much of what you do, and what we've got to do together is like we're building more of that for more people. And I think if everyone got to feel that, like this world would be a vastly better place.
Yeah, but you're preaching to the choir there. Well,
Yeah.
you did just have like a big transition moment for your life. It's like
Yeah.
a little bit painful for me to know that you no longer live in Wisconsin, just because I feel like there are very few kindred spirits I have that share this sort of worldview. But you stepped into a fabulous new role in Colorado, that
Yeah.
brings together libraries, museums, and major civic events. I'm curious, what made you say yes to this opportunity after being so, I guess maybe let me put it this way. Your work was so place-based for so long and very much rooted in Kenosha and southeastern Wisconsin. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? What made you take this leap? And then, how has it been going?
Yeah. So moving, I'm just on like I'm almost hitting the 3-month mark, which feels crazy. Time is a weird construct and I hate it. But choosing to move to Louisville, Colorado and take this leap as the director of cultural services was really partially because I had come to sort of a plateau in my natural career where I was. I had the honor of serving as the interim director for 10 months and leading the ship of the Kenosha Public Library. And I really just wanted to figure out like what was next for me. So some pretty heavy reflecting on, what was I ready for? And I felt really ready to be the person making vision happen, right?
Mhm.
So as I was looking around at opportunities, um, and saw this one, which married together so much of my skill set and my passion, but also had this beautiful glow to it as a place that I could see myself growing still. And I
Sure.
was like, that's what I want. I don't want to move into a role where I already know everything. I'm already like fully equipped and fully ready to just walk in and be on autopilot. I wanted something that felt challenging. And I think part of that is because for the last, 17 years, my role was rooted in my hometown,
Mhm.
right? I was the hometown kid, was really connected to the businesses and the people, and I miss them deeply. I miss Wisconsin and Midwest Nice and Quick Trips so much. You know, I think I was just ready to feel challenged again
Mhm.
and ready to feel uncomfortable again. And I hadn't felt that sort of longing for that in a while. And so when this showed up and Ellie, my wife, and I came out for the interview and I got to know the team and I got to see the spark in some of them for community. And like I could hear it in them, and I could hear the twinklings of, oh, we care about this, but we don't have the language for it yet. I'm like, ooh,
Mm.
I know how to enhance this.
Right.
I know how to take away chairs and make it a better event. I know how
Mhm.
to turn things up a notch.
Mhm.
And so that just really excited me. And it's been good. It's been really good. It's been challenging, which is again part of what I hoped for. Um, it's been a little bit of a culture shock. The sun is always out, always, which is, I mean, I'm loving it. My skin is burnt all the time. Um, but every morning I wake up and I look at the mountains and I'm grateful. I am grateful for everyone who helped build up this kid who was really concerned about crayons into a almost 41-year-old woman who is so excited to like raise up more people who care about belonging and care about each other. And there's just so much gratitude just oozes from me with this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to making magic here. um, and I'm looking forward to coming home for good visits with good people. uh, yeah, I'll be back in town hopefully in the winter, like
Okay, good.
February.
That's
Yes, I'll
awesome.
let you know for sure.
Well, you claim to lead from a listen first perspective. I imagine these first 90 days have been a lot of listening as you sort of like
Mhm.
transition into this new role. Can you think of a time, and it could be from the recent past or from your time in Wisconsin, when listening to the community completely changed the direction of a program or a strategy? Because I think a lot of people think, oh, yeah, we'll just sort of survey folks. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah,
worse, we know best, particularly coming from a public institution.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we know what the traditions are, we know what people want, but this is a unique
Mhm.
thing. And I feel like it's often overlooked step when I think about, like, how do we move a community into a sort of, how do we catalyze a community?
Yeah, I always think it's funny that I describe myself as listen first because I talk so much. I do promise that I try really hard to listen first. And the first 90 days here has been so much listening. When I think about where I learned the power of this is I go back to being a brand new baby marketer, right? I'd been in public libraries for 10 years already. I'd been well rooted in my community. I was active in different organizations. And one of the very first things I did as that library's first marketer, I jumped into a strategic planning process that was already in the works. So I didn't have a hand in framing it out. To be quiet and listen and take notes. And I remember this one gentleman very determined that the library didn't have book clubs. And I
He
could
didn't want
feel,
the library to have book clubs?
no, he wanted us to have book clubs. He thought that we didn't have them.
Oh, okay.
And so I could feel that like righteousness like bubbling in my stomach where I'm like, dude, open up to page 2. There's 12 book clubs. Like, here are the 45 Facebook posts and here's the press releases. Like, why don't you know about these book clubs? And I could feel that like it's righteousness. That's all it is. It's pride and righteousness, right? Because it's that I know better. Like, I have book clubs. I'm advertising book clubs. Why don't you know about the book clubs? And as I was listening, there's just kind of this like gentle wave that came over to me that I was like, oh, I'm doing this wrong. Like,
Oh.
I'm putting my information in the places that I know to put information for myself, right? I'm
Mhm.
looking for where I would go. I'm not considering my audience and their needs and where they are looking for information. And I'm judging them for not finding the information, but ultimately you know, I'm curtailing the success of the team and of the org because I'm not considering my audience. And so listening to this man talk for like 25 minutes about us not having book clubs and not being allowed to rebut, um, really like turned me on end on how I listen. Am I listening to just the words people are saying, or am I listening to what causes this situation? Um, am I leading with curiosity or judgment? And I feel like, Ted Lasso put that into words for so many of us, but like really trying to come back to my response is not being judgment, like, oh, well, you're not looking in the right places, but rather curiosity, like, where should I be putting information that this community will find it? Because that's ultimately the goal, right? Is to connect with them. And from that, I took away anytime I'm coming across a problem or a sticking point or a pain point, whatever we want to frame it as, I try to sort of step back and hear from people like, what led us here? Why is this a problem? Why does this feel bad? Should it feel bad? Does it feel bad because we're telling ourselves this other story about it? Are we filling in gaps that aren't there? And just really open the space for people to reflect and offer up themselves so that I can better hear where we're trying to go. And so often it all comes down to misalignment,
Mm.
right? Misunderstanding, miscommunication. I'm putting out 75 advertisements about book clubs, but into the void because I'm not aligned with where that audience is looking for that information. Um, and if I took the time to listen to them, to talk to them, to hear what they were telling me, I would hear where they're looking,
Mm.
ask where they're looking. I could build that relationship to better understand. So, um, since then, I've really tried to start with, what do you want to share with me? What's important for me? What do you think is important for me to know? So as a new director, I have a team of 39 now, and I've met with 37 of them as of today, one-on-one, and said like, hey, this is your time. What do you want me to know about you? Some
Mhm.
people have told me all about their families and their pets and their vacations. Some people have told me about their career path. Some people have told me about everything they want to see change. Some people have told me they want to see nothing change. But I've really just taken the time to hear them and to hear what matters to them and what drives them, what motivates them, to ask questions with curiosity so that when I'm making decisions, it's coming from a place of what's best for everyone and not what's best for my personal beliefs or viewpoints. Yeah.
What you're describing takes a enormous level of humility. I mean, I think your 5-year-old report card told us that you were already a deep empath, but
Yeah.
it's one thing to like want to take care of everyone else, but you can become, even as you're saying, like righteous in that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Empathy, what you're describing is like a deep, deep humility that you might not know all the answers and that you're going to like give people the space to help you figure that out, which I
Yeah.
think is hard as a leader because there's a tension there, right? Like people are looking to you
Mhm.
for the answer. You've been brought in as an expert in your field and to help transform this particular community. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
it takes patience and practice and the ability to sustain authenticity, which I think is sort of like a silly word in a lot of ways, like especially in the marketing sense. Like I think people use it and it's become a little bit trite. But I'm curious how you sustain that level, because I know you very personally. I genuinely believe you that this is how you operate as a leader with your team, with the organization, within the community. You know what I mean? Like all the concentric circles that come out from you. How do you sustain that authenticity, Brandi, when navigating the politics and the
Mm,
pressures of really what is like a government job?
yeah,
Like it's, you know what I mean? Like you have a government job.
I do. And I take it all very like seriously, deeply, right? And I try to share with my team as much transparency as I can. So I
Hmm.
try to explain to them and help them understand that my role is inherently political and I have to understand the workings of that. And I have to hold space for tolerance doesn't feel like the right word, but just like understanding that not everyone is going to come to the same understanding in the same way.
Mm,
And it is work. It is a practice. It is such a practice to do. As much as it is work, there is such a freedom in being able to admit that I don't have all the answers, right? I have been brought in as a subject matter expert. I am sitting in the top position for these organizations, and I am charged with making decisions and knowing about trends and understanding best practices. And I have found that the best way for me to navigate that is to very openly and honestly like fail well, admit when I don't know, admit when I'm
yeah.
wrong, admit when I need help, so that the team recognizes that I'm not going to have every answer, but I'm going to work to find it.
Hmm.
And when I'm dealing with the sort of stakeholder side, right? The
Sure.
community investors, the political side, whether that is council or
Hmm.
now I report directly to like city manager. It's understanding what the core goal is and how do I keep moving that forward. Like
Mm,
I believe that this team's job is to curate, tend to, and care for the identity of this community with what we do,
wow.
right? Like we, as cultural services, we are the reflection of imagination and art and creation. And in a world that is very science and tech focused, which are undeniably important, I think sometimes we can forget about creation and art and what makes life beautiful.
Mm,
And I think that all labor is valuable, but I also think that people don't move to communities because they have nice streets and trash gets picked up on Tuesdays. I think they invest in communities with their time and their families because they feel like they can belong. And so when I am faced with navigating the political atmosphere, I keep coming back to that truth. Does this support more belonging? Does this
hmm.
support a stronger community? Does this allow us to better reflect, curate, and care for the identity of this community? And if it doesn't, I say that. I say,
Hmm.
I don't see how this aligns. Can you either help me see how it aligns or help me understand why misalignment is valuable here? And then being new on top of all of that, um, it's a lot of trying to build trust
Hmm.
and build it quickly, and that requires me being like really authentic and vulnerable and building relationships at a scale and pace that feels not necessarily inorganic as in the relationships are fake, but the pace feels so fast that I'm like, okay, I'm really having to dive in hard and fast here so that my team, my colleague team knows that they can trust me to show up for what's best for the community, not
Mm.
just what's best for me in this role.
I
Yeah.
think that's right. And I think your intent is right. I think you should give yourself more grace that you have more time than you think. Because it just really
Yeah.
does take time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And my sense is that your anxiety to move quickly is because you're coming from a place that you had 41 years to embed in.
Yeah.
And so all of it feels new and you want to like get to the meat and the good stuff. Um,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah.
I think you have more, you should give yourself a little more grace with
You're
that.
right. You're right. I
And
think,
I think you have grand plans. So, I mean, this is like the fun stuff. I want to know
right.
like what role do you see these types of public institutions having on our like social infrastructure and the future of cities? I mean, I know Louisville
Yeah.
is a smaller city, but I think you think a lot about that at a national scale.
Absolutely. And when I think about these I mean, that's what libraries are, right? Libraries are public and social infrastructure. And I think about how we have the ability to really influence and impact like the health of a community. I see these institutions as the cultural hub,
Mm-hmm.
right? We are where creation can happen. We are where everyone can be the next somebody, right? The next creator. I recently read a book about Vincent van Gogh's brother. And I'm trying to
Okay.
remember the name of it. It'll come to me, of course, when we're done. But in the book, they talked a lot about how Van Gogh in his time was so unappreciated and so um, judged and even ridiculed for his mental health, his style, like the art he was putting out. And now we look at those as masterpieces,
Mm-hmm.
right? I get to work in an arena that allows people to explore what masterpieces we get to appreciate in the future. And some of that is tangible. Some of it is, having an art studio. Some of it is providing dance programs. Some of it is connecting people with like ideas and cultures that they wouldn't be exposed to otherwise. And some of it is in ways that we'll never see.
Mm-hmm.
It's the people who are just looking for a place of safety and solace, a place
Sure.
where their humanity is seen and like validated at a time in their life that's really difficult. And I think as we continue to look at what builds cities, what builds healthy, thriving communities, this is where the humanity can be nourished, can be reflected, and can be celebrated. And I love seeing libraries that are like at the precipice of that in their communities. And I love seeing, museums and art institutes that are really like bringing in this open doors, open arms, like how do we bring inspiration into the day to day? And I'm hopeful that as we continue to kind of have this calling back to caring for each other and this calling back to recognizing that it needs to be all of us and each of us to be successful, that these institutions will remain at the forefront.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I love that idea of like being the one that's sort of gathering what will be remembered by. Um, in such a beautiful way. My children are finally at the age where I feel like they can actually appreciate a museum. And so
Yeah.
we were abroad this summer and I was like, wow, I think they'd actually enjoy going to some Etruscan ruins and seeing what that was. And
Mhm.
it was dawning on me while we were there that it's the first time they've ever seen ruin. Like they've never had, this is I can see the like upload of like this is new information. Like people
Yeah.
lived here 3,000 years ago and they had a little teeny museum on the property that had the artifacts they found in, you know what I mean, like excavating this space, including the grave of a small child that the Etruscans
Mm.
like buried with their it's the tradition to bury them with their most poignant like objects. And so as a child, you can imagine like there were toys in this grave and the kids happened up to it and they were like, oh my God, that's a kid. You know what I mean? This is
Yeah.
just a tiny little skeleton. I was like, it is a kid. Kids used to die a lot easier, you know what I mean, back in the day. And they were
Yeah.
just bewitched by the toys, like the toys were preserved. And I could tell that was like really affecting my 7-year-old. And like hours later, um, we were eating dinner and he out of nowhere said, what of my toys do you think a little boy 3,000 years from now will find? And I was like, wow, this is like so fascinating to me that you're like thinking about
Yeah.
this idea of legacy and you understand that like, you know what I mean? You won't always be here and that another 7-year-old will happen upon. And then I was teasing like probably nothing or maybe everything because it was all made of plastic and it won't have
It'll never disappear.
de-
Yeah.
decompensated at all. It look exactly the same as it
Yeah.
does now.
It's your trampoline and your Nerf gun, my dude. Yeah.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
but
But
no,
I
I
think
think
you're right. I mean, where else? I was really moved by like the fact that like we've never had that experience together. It's a conversation about life and death and what we think is valuable. Like it opens up this whole new
Mhm.
way for me to parent my child. Even in this, like, all we're going to do this afternoon is go to this fun place. That was the premise. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to go do something fun in this different place. But it has affected them. And even the little one, like weeks later, we were home driving past like a school that's being like under construction or whatever. It was like a pile of concrete rubble. And my daughter was like, "Is that a ruin?" I was like, "No, it's not.
Not quite, but
Not,
maybe
not
one
a ruin,
day.
but I mean, technically, I guess those are the ruins of that construction site. But I like
Yeah,
really appreciate you like understand. You know what I mean? Like this is
yeah.
like forged new neural pathways in your tiny brain. You know what I mean? In
Isn't
this
it?
way.
Isn't it magical?
Yeah.
I think what you're tapping into is the most joyous part of my job, and that
Hmm.
is curiosity,
Right.
right? Like we get to take this curiosity that is innately in us as children,
Hmm.
and then as we age, we learn more, and we just naturally lose it, right? We learn
Right.
that the stove is hot, we learn how planes stay in the air, and we just lose this wonder and
Hmm.
curiosity. And these spaces, museums, libraries, arts and culture events, like we get to welcome people back into that.
Hmm.
And that's really freaking cool. Like
I
it
think it's
just
so
really
cool.
it's so
And it's
exciting.
so
And
fun.
mhm,
Yeah, and to your point about events, obviously you know what Milwaukee, the primary service we offer is experienced event design and production. So we think
yeah,
about unique events all day long. But
yeah,
I think from a city perspective, how do you think large scale civic gatherings will change and need to change to stay relevant and meaningful? I mean, I think you're doing the thing that happens when you're coming in and you're new and you're like, do we need to do this again? You have a window to ask that
mhm,
question because of your newness. But I
yeah,
think, particularly of what I see here in Milwaukee, like there are definitely events that have gone on for decades, well past their perhaps like cultural prime.
yeah,
And there is a desire to sort of keep things the way they always were that I have personally bucked against for the whole of my career and
yeah.
challenged, like, does everything need to become a series or does it need to be annualized? Like, can we have something be a one-off that's truly meaningful? So where do you kind of sit on that spectrum at this point in your career?
Yeah, so this is such a timely question. Louisville is really into Labor Day. So we are an old coal mining town with a very long, deep labor history,
Sure.
and there is a slew of traditions that occur over Labor Day weekend. So I'm on like day
Oh yeah, your
15.
is really high right now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and so Friday night we do a dinner for all the senior citizens in town. 300 senior citizens come out. They eat a free dinner with us. It's lovely. It's as controlled chaos as it can be.
Mm-hmm.
But Monday we do the largest Labor Day parade in the state of Colorado, and then we host a fall festival afterwards. And that was year 87, I
Oh my
believe, of
word.
this
Talk about
tradition.
decades. Nearly a
Yeah,
century.
yeah. And in my newness, I am looking with as much curiosity as possible. It's like, well, is this still serving a purpose? What is this doing? What do we want it to do? But also, what do we want those who are going to inherit this from us to receive when we give it, right? And I'm having a lot of those conversations with community members and stakeholders right now with labor organizers across the state because, again, we're just coming off of this parade because Labor Day is inherently political and there were
Sure.
some concerns about, what that looks like. But really just the idea of, is this still benefiting the people
Mhm.
more than it's just a thing we do?
Sure.
Like, is there still something that's coming from it? Still, magic or belonging? And I'm really happy to say, like, that tradition, it is well rooted. I think the team is going to really, continue on this beautiful tradition. But taking the time to look at it and say, like, how do we evolve and when do we sunset, and helping people recognize it's okay to sunset, right? I think when we think about these large civic gatherings, for them to continue to be relevant and for them to continue to be impactful, we have to keep looking at what is their impact.
Mhm.
Is it just that 15,000 people line the streets of a 29,000 person town for a singular event? Like, is that enough?
Mhm.
And if it is, why? And if it isn't, what do we need to value add to make
Mhm.
sure that it's enough for this to continue? I think it's challenging, right? When you're looking at tradition, when you're looking at things that people have held dear to them at different points in time, to come to them with sort of a critical eye. And I think, again, if we can do that, building trust, developing those relationships, and again, centering the public good, we can have those conversations that are uncomfortable and difficult, but without ideally, personal insult or hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And and we can make them better. How do we
Great.
make it better every year? You know?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think the last thing I want to touch on with you is really you've talked a lot about equity. You've talked a lot about, making the table longer. You noted that like even something like a 80 plus year tradition like Labor Day can be politicized in this moment.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts on this moment and the impacts of all of that? I'm assuming that you probably have some potential impact in terms of funding, you know what I mean? Like just being a
Yeah.
public institution. Like, how are you approaching what feels like, God willing, I've been so excited to have a moment in our millennial trajectory to not be living through an unprecedented moment, but for the love of God, like another unprecedented moment.
It's just our thing. It's what
Yeah,
we do.
exactly. Yeah. How are you thinking about all of that? How are you navigating it? I mean, you could take it from your own approach, like being a queer woman in this moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's hard to extricate you yourself from all of that too.
And I think that that's part of why I am where I am, right? Like, both in career and location, like I was thoughtful on the job search about what opportunities and protections were in places for my family, what extra safeties would be in my communities, making sure I was living in a place that wasn't necessarily so uniformed and thought that there wasn't diversity, but a place that I could feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
um, to be myself, to be very clearly a queer woman. Like this is a moment in time that is both so heavy, it's so
Right.
deeply heavy. Like we are watching these institutions who have served us for so long, demonized and villainized. We're watching essential funding being moved from everything, from health, from safety, and now more than ever, that call into the importance of like community and belonging and caring for each other. I feel that more loudly than ever. I feel
Mm-hmm.
that determination more loudly than ever, that like at the end of the day, it is my job to care about whether someone else's bowl was empty. And coming around to navigating that in my career, it's how do we make sure that we're making decisions that help to protect the most vulnerable? How are we making
Yeah.
sure that the most marginalized are considered in our systems and our strategies? And how are we addressing where we see things like white supremacy or homophobia and transphobia? How are we addressing that out loud and holding space for people to change? Because I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the other thing we're seeing now that is unprecedented is we are seeing people, and it doesn't always feel evident because our news cycles are salacious, but we are seeing people say that their minds are being changed, say that
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to stand for the things that are happening. And I think that it's a really hard time to be a person who cares,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it is finding the joy and the magic and the beauty of connection, of community, recognizing that I too benefit from being in a community where people are cared for and
Mm-hmm.
allowing myself to be cared for. Um, yeah, it's a bit of a day at a time situation, but it is also I spend a lot of time thinking about, okay, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year,
Mm-hmm.
what do we need to put in place now so that this is inheritable,
Mm-hmm.
so that, you know, 87 years from today, whoever's sitting in this chair ideally isn't having the same conversations, right? We're not still talking about how do we fight these inequities, how do we right these wrongs, but they understand that we got here and we got here together, and that together
Yeah.
is the way through. So
Oh, I
I feel
love
like
that,
it's a bit
Brandy.
of a non-answer.
What a beautiful aspiration. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And a way to like hold on to hope in spite of how shaky the ground feels.
yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what it is every day. Like I have a lot of people ask me like how are you navigating today? like this world. And it is buckets and buckets of hope, but it's hope that is reinforced with the experiences that I have seen. I've seen the beauty of community. I've seen the power of belonging. I have rich, beautiful relationships with the people in my life, and that keeps my North Star bright. Like, we can get there. We just have to be that. And it's not always easy, and I don't always do it well, but I try, and
you continue to be an inspiration for me. Really appreciate this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Really great. Really, really great.